your childhood.
Right.
Not easy beginnings for anybody.
Well, I didn't know that as a kid, all right? But when you became an adult and you look back on it and you hear all these stories, you realize, geez, maybe it wasn't the easiest. How come you were hidden in a closet and upstairs in bedrooms when there were parties so that people couldn't see you and see that the parents had kids 7 and 8 years old? That was a little weird.
And how come, you know, you ended up not living with your mom?
Well, my dad and mom got divorced, and my mom had moved another guy into the house. She was an alcoholic. And my father won custody, and for the rest of his life, the rest of our lives, told us that she was a prostitute and a drunk. You know.
When did you find out the truth?
When I was 18 years old, I took off from home, went and found my mom, and moved her in with me. I held 3 jobs at the time so that I could afford an apartment to keep her with me.
That was in New York, right?
That was New York, yeah.
And then you moved to California.
I went into the service first, and then when I got hooked up with an Okie band, singing rock and roll in the 50s. And I moved to California, yeah. Moved to California to start singing.
But it was pretty poignant, because very poignant. She died.
She died the day I arrived.
The day
She had been living with me, and she'd been living with me. I told her, I said, Mom, I'm going to California. I have a chance now to get into singing. I did. She moved back with her husband, who she had left, who was a writer. And that night, she suffocated to death. Yeah.
She was one of the Bennett girls, Joan, Constance, and your mother, Barbara.
Joan,
right?
Connie, and Barbara.
Yeah. Did she grow up with tough beginnings? I mean, did you see this business of the cycle continuing?
Well, what I saw was that she had a father, Richard Bennett, who was also an actor, my grandfather, who was an absolute nutcase. A nice guy. I remember at 6 years old riding the San Francisco cable car with him. It was summertime. He had on this large raccoon coat. And he got on and he said, you will sit here, my boy, and I will sit, Granddaddy will sit here. And I sat there like a little kid, you know. Guy came around to collect the fare, and he didn't have the nickel. The guy said, sir, you have to pay a nickel or get off. He said, do you know who I am? I am Richard Bennett. Stood up, opened his coat, and didn't have a stitch of clothes on him. So, plus, we sent him away when he was 76 years old to Venezuela because he had gotten a 15-year-old chorus girl pregnant. So he had everything working for him, but...
Wow. You reconciled with your father, too. And I was just talking to Mort about this because I think it happens so often, especially since you're now professionally, you're in this business and you know the pressures of it, and it's tough. Your dad, when you look back now, do you realize how tough it must have been for him to be on the road and away from his son? And
here's the pressure, all right? The real pressure is you all of a sudden start believing the things people say about you, the good stuff. You can always eliminate the bad stuff. You believe the good stuff. So all of a sudden you become, you think that you've got to hit the sack with everyone, you got to let your morals down, you got to go crazy. That's the tough part of the business, all right, because you want to feed that ego. And obviously my dad had those problems.
do you?
Yeah.
How do you keep yourself from falling into the same
By
trap?
calling my wife 5 and 6 times a day.
She's very special to you.
Oh, you bet.
Finding her when you did was good timing for your life?
Yeah, good timing, because she had a real rough life. She came from a family that was, practically an orphan. She raised her brothers, her younger brothers, at the age of 14 in a trailer house by herself with no adult supervision at all. She got married at 16 years old. She was beaten badly by her husband, who was a dope addict, who stabbed her in the stomach, broke her nose, broke her wrist, fractured her skull. I learned these things as I was married to her because in the first 3 years of our marriage, it was always a confrontation. She was always into my face. And later, when I found these things out, I realized, like so many women, if you've been beaten and abused, you assume that everyone's going to do the same thing to you.
Absolutely.
You know? I never did it. She's as calm as they come now, except when she calls me a stupid bastard.
She doesn't agree with you. She across the board pretty much doesn't agree with you.
Yeah, the only thing she agrees with me on is the preborn children situation.
Abortion.
Yeah.
Right to life. You, in fact, are adopting. You and Kim.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell everybody about that. It's
Well,
very special.
Kimmy couldn't have babies because of some of the damage that was done to her when she was young, and she wanted to have a family of her own. She's only 31 years old, and I have 3 other daughters. So we found a lady who was married and was going to have an abortion because her husband was leaving her, and I talked her into letting us adopt the child. So,
There's a risk there.
sure.
You're worried about that?
Well, it was a hell of a lot more of a risk for that baby before we asked her.
I totally agree. But what if the mother came back and you can't really totally protect
Then
this?
if the mother came back, it's mother love, and mother love has the right to come back anytime it wants to.
In fact, you want that mother involved, don't you?
Yeah.
To some degree. Because of what you saw happen to your own brother.
Yeah, I have an older brother who's adopted. He wasn't, and I can't really blame this on my father or anyone. In days when we were younger, all right, in our generation, when we were younger, you didn't tell people that the kids that they were adopted. My brother was misbehaving at the age of 16, and my father said something, "I never should have adopted you." Well, that's how he discovered he was, and my father didn't say that in a mean way. It was just a natural reaction. And that's how he found out he was adopted. Then my father would never tell him who his mother or who his father was.
And he had a tough life because of it, didn't he?
57 years old today, doesn't work, had 4 kids of his own, abandoned his kids to his ex-wife, never saw the kids, never did anything for them.
We're going to run a clip, and I wanted to run it because I watched your face on Donahue when you saw this. You clearly loved your dad a lot. Let's take a look at Morton Downey Sr. singing on The Milton Berle Show.
Morton, we're all prepared for you. We have a piano and every...
Oh, great, no, great. Whippoorwills call, and even if not, we'll hurry to my blue heaven. A turn to the right, then a little white light will lead you to my blue heaven. You'll see a smiling face, then a fireplace and a cozy room. Then a little nest that nestles where the roses bloom. Just Molly and me, and baby makes 3. We're happy in my blue heaven.
Great. What would your dad...
No wonder he hated my kind of singing, huh? And I'd sing all those scramble songs of rock and roll.
What would your dad think of you now? I mean, hard to say.
Well, in the last 10 years of his life, we really got along great. And, you know, having been born Sean Morton Downey Jr., because he was Sean Morton Downey, I was Morton as a youngster. Then as I got older, I was called Sean. And then about 10 years ago, and he never referred to me as Morton, hated me using the name Morton. Didn't want anyone to take what he had done for the name to build it up and change it. And I guess that's typical little Irish kid,
sure,
you know.
Yeah.
And he picked up the phone one night down at his home in Florida, and he said, "I can't make it over with my kid for dinner," he said, "but I'd like to make reservations for Morton Downey Jr." And it was the first time in 30 years he referred to me as Morton Downey Jr., and I knew he had passed it over finally.
You spent a lot of summers here. You know this area very
I
well.
love
The
this
connection
area.
with the Kennedys, your dad played for them. You grew up advantaged in one way, but you know, you missed a lot.
I don't think so. I don't think I missed anything, all right? I grew up with the silver spoon. I grew up with all the servants, and I spit the silver spoon out, and I made friends with the servants, and I left home. I left home because A, I didn't want to work for my father's company, which was Coca-Cola. B, I didn't want to be told what I had to do. I knew that my father's best friend, Joe Kennedy, wanted his kids in politics. Consequently, my father wanted me in politics. And I had a direction being set out for me. I was to become, in those days, Teddy was going to become the senator from Rhode Island, Bobby from Connecticut, and Jack from Massachusetts. I was scheduled to become the mayor of New York City. Well, you know.
It still could happen.
No way. No way. No way. I identify much more with people who've had to really work, who've had to struggle, and who have never been listened to before. And so that's why I've always had a big mouth. Now I'm getting big. Now, the word cults, all right? To some, it conjures up images of Moonies and Hare Krishnas harassing people in airports. To others, it could be your neighbor, whose idea of a good time is sacrificing the babysitter.
Morton Downey show is a very good show. I think the guy, he's right about most of the things he says. I like a lot of the programs that he has on.
I don't think something like that should be allowed on TV because he's too angry at the world, really.
I think sometimes he needs to chill out maybe and just allow the people to say what they feel too.
I think he's kind of biased and maybe a touch bigoted, but what can you do? People are entitled to their own opinions.
Do you agree with him?
As that man of the 80s, that father holds his baby. Isn't that great? You're involved here, okay? It is your segment. And at home, our phone lines are open. I've only one question. We saw David Sittenfeld, one of your producers, walk on with you. And that was from a show that actually ran at ROR last night. I watched it on the cable network on cults. During the course of that show, you let this minister talk and explain his church. But you turned on him when he said to your deprogrammer, "You're not an expert, what do you know?" And you kept saying to the audience, "Trust me," and to him, he's an expert. And boy, you just went wild on the guy. Personal anger, where does it fit in your show?
Personal anger fits in everyone's life, you know. It fits in my show because my show is not, it's not cosmetic, it's not made up, there's nothing scripted. It's totally flow of consciousness. And television for so long has been, you know, Marshall McLuhan said the cool medium. That's bull. Television has been portraying life as we would like it to be. Leave It to Beaver, the Nelson family, the Huxtables. That ain't what life is all about. What life is about is sometimes anger, sometimes frustration.
When you get angry with a guest like that, Mort, what does it do to the issue? I mean, all of a sudden then the guy can't be heard, or the woman can't be heard? Is it over?
No, let me tell you something. We were raised, and you know it, Eileen, we were raised in an era of rock and roll music where the music is screaming and ranting and raving, and we look at our kids and we say, all I heard that lyric going was, and the kid says, no, Ma, listen to it. The lyric says, I love you very much because you're the best thing that ever happened in my life. I mean, they can hear all the music. They can hear all the words. We got to start hearing the words, too.
You want to talk to the guy who called you a liar?
Yeah, I want to hear the guy who called me a liar.
Sure. You know, at the end of the show that we just saw a clip of last night, you called a Methodist minister a Satanist.
You bet.
A satanic preacher because he didn't agree with you.
No, not because he didn't agree with me.
No, it was because he didn't agree with you, Morton.
No, not
That's
because
exactly
he didn't
what it
agree
was.
with me. Not because he didn't agree with me. Because he had obviously been programmed himself. When I could say to him, James Jones killed 914 people and he was a cult, do you believe he had the right to exist to do that to the people? And he could still say to me, yes? Then the guy's been programmed.
The word it's just a word. The word programmed. It doesn't mean anything.
It does mean something to someone who knows anything about cults, all right?
Let me ask you, did you just form this opinion of Mort last night?
No, of course not. I've watched the show before.
So you watch?
I watched you when you told the people of the United States that Massachusetts has a law that allows oral sex with animals.
No,
that's
sir.
not true.
Listen with your ears and not with your mouth, all right? What I said was in 1970, Dukakis sponsored legislation, which did not pass, that allowed you to decriminalize bestiality. Now, pal, you better hide the Easter Bunny if you elect that guy.
Morton, you can deny it all you want, but the words you used...
Don't tell me what I can deny. I know what I said on my show.
The words you used were oral sex with animals. I watched that show.
Oh, yes, that's in the bill. Read it, all right? Go get it. It's available. It's 1970. 1970 available. Brookline, I believe, is where he was from at the time.
The fact is that what you do is you distort and you twist and you fabricate things to prove your points, and you have two standards of freedom of speech, one for the people you agree with and one for the people you don't agree with, and you're subverting everything that is holy in the United States Constitution while you sit there and preach your gospel to America.
The facts are, sir, that you have just subverted and distorted everything that I said. Everyone has the right to freedom of speech. I'll fight for everyone's right, whether they agree or disagree with me, just as I fight for you.
Okay, it brings up an issue. Most television talk hosts do not share a personal point of view.
Oh, they do. They do.
Not as openly as you do.
Oh, no, not as openly. It's very subliminal, very clever, all right? Little things like, today our guest is the head of the Communist Party. And now the guy hasn't said anything except our guest is head of the Communist Party. Hello, Gorby, how are you? I mean, If you watch my Phil Donahue show, I didn't go down Phil's throat because I really wanted Phil to explain to the public where he stood on the issues.
Take a call. Good morning. You're on Good Day.
Hello.
There you are. There you are. Yes. Good morning.
This is Natalie.
Hi, Natalie.
Hi, Mort.
Hi, Nat. How are you?
Good. Good to talk to you. I love you. I think your show is great.
Thank you.
Let me clarify something because it occurred to me. You're not Natalie Jacobson.
No.
No.
And I know you're not Natalie Wood.
Mort, I grew up in a household with a father, just like you. My dad says you're a fake, and I don't want you to be a fake. Are you a conservative Republican? Please tell my dad you are.
I am no. As a matter of fact, I'm a conservative independent.
Okay.
I have voted Republican for the last 8 years.
Great.
I don't trust either one of the political parties because I think they can be bought.
Why then in your book does it say I'm a Kennedy liberal?
Well, really, if Jack Kennedy were alive today, I think he had the intelligence to flow with how the people feel. And if you talk to the people, they're not conservative, they're not liberal, they have some conservative ideas, some liberal ideas, and they're like I am, radical centrists. We want to take the ideas that are good from both sides, put them together, and stop being afraid to work with each other.
Did you see the movie Network?
Oh, sure.
Where, was it Peter O'Toole? Is that right? Who stood up and said, who? Peter
Fish.
stood up and said, I'm mad as hell, I'm not going to take it anymore.
Yeah.
Did that...
Patty Chayefsky, 10 years ago, probably knew the pulse of America better than any of us did. And little did we ever think that some bubblehead would come along and be that kind of a guy.
But did you think then that's the way to go?
Yeah, I was always angry. I was always angry. When I was on the Delegate Selection Commission of the Democratic National Committee in Washington, D.C., we'd hold regional hearings around the country. I'd go out. All they were talking about was the Vietnam War. Everyone ignored the plight of kids. Everyone ignored the plight of the elderly in this country. I wanted to talk about it because I saw a problem coming, and no one wanted to talk about it.
Hi, Mort. I have to tell you, you've come a long way since the days at WICE when I think I last knew you or talked to you about 30 years ago.
That's right.
But,
WICE is...
That's in
Providence.
Providence, yeah. As a matter of fact, I dug out a record that they're probably going to do something with today that I got from your days at Y Records. However,
you mean Mort singing?
Yeah, I guess that's what it was.
You'll understand why my father was so upset when he heard that one.
I can understand why. That was the only record I think that was. No, wait a second. Now this was the only record I think that was had the unique record of being the only two-sided hit to be #1 for 3 months in a row. Was it? At that particular station. Nobody else would play it, but the station you were at. The question I wanted to ask you.
Don't tell me it was that horrible thing produced in Providence.
It was a nice record.
Oh, was it? Okay.
The question I wanted to ask you, I occasionally do a talk show on cable TV in Stoughton. And it probably has an audience of 12 or 15 people, depending on which way the wind is blowing. I've been doing it for 3 years and really never have problems getting guests to come on because I don't abuse them. But my question to you is do you ever, do you run out of people that come on the show? I mean, why would a person want to come on your show and catch the abuse that they really catch?
Well, you'll notice that a lot of people will come on the show and won't catch abuse because they'll be straightforward, truthful with their answer, regardless of how left-wing they may be. Take a guy like Alan Dershowitz, all right?
Yeah.
Alan's done my shows, radio and television, about 11 times. And I find him to be a fascinating, intelligent, articulate, brilliant exponent of his feelings. It gives me an opportunity to try and be just as articulate on my feelings without having to rant and rave. Now, if I go into Alan's face, he'll come right back into mine, and that's great.
Which is rare on your show.
But it's
Guests
great.
Don't do that.
But they should do it.
Oh, they try.
They should do it. Some of them do it.
They try. The other thing is, I'm really surprised at the restraint that most of them show. I remember watching the night that you had the Talkmasters on. These are supposed to be the heaviest Talkmasters in the country. You had 3 of them on. I think one was from Washington, one was from New York, one was from California. That you went up and you grabbed a notepad from one of them, and then I guess he went after you.
Conselving or something.
It was crazy.
Well, the guy was a nutcake. I mean, here he was. He's supposed to be a guy who's articulate and everything comes off his head, and he's writing down everything he's going to say in advance. That's phony. Phony. I just wanted to point it out.
There's a lot more to talk about with Morton Downey Jr. We'll take a break, and Mort, I know this thrills you to death. You're about to talk with 3 critics.
Oh, great. I love
Loves
it.
critics. This man loves critics. Our lines are open, and we'll include you in the conversation throughout the show, so stay with us. There's no doubt about it that Morton Downey has the most controversial talk show on television today. In the Boston area alone, the ratings have gone up 71% for this sensation-packed show, but it's a forum for aggressive and often hostile behavior. The host can and is often rude to guests. The guests and the audience take each other on like boxers in a ring, and conversation, more often than not, becomes confrontation.
Tell me who. Tell me who in the military told you they were assaulted by a... What is that? Let me hear who in the military, who means a pot of is involved
How
in
about the
feeling
Joint
he's
Chiefs
under.
of Staff?
They
Listen,
told you?
the
They
whole
wouldn't talk to
frontier-
you? You're not...
I told you that the Soviet Empire has 62 million trained people. Now you had the insolence to make a certain gesture of dismissal. How do you mean? Do you question this figure? If you question, I'll tell you you are a liar.
In here. I've got all the figures in here. He is absolutely wrong.
What about the Pentagon's publication?
Capability. 10,000 ICBMs. They have 10,000 warheads.
I have told you, Dr. Bowman, that the Pentagon publishes every year the most authoritative book. And I'm quoting that the Soviet Empire has 62 million trained people.
Okay, we're going to...
Now you are giving me this.
Oh boy, what do the critics think of this latest edition of tabloid television? Is it style without substance? Is it just plain offensive? Joining us this morning are Bill Marks, a media and critic, and also a professor at Boston University. Good morning to you, Bill.
Good morning.
And the Boston Phoenix television critic, Cliff Garboden. Good morning, Cliff.
Oh.
And I want you to meet Ira Rosofsky. He is a psychologist, and he writes television criticism for the Village Voice. Good morning. Now, none of you have ever met. So meet Morton Downey Jr. In fact, you're just looking at each other, I think, for the first time. Can I start with you, Ira? As a psychologist, I know you're a critic too, but what do you see going on in the audience? Some people say that it's kind of, you can build a mass hysteria. It takes a couple of folks and they all get crazy. What do you see?
Well, I'm a big sports fan and I like going to the Mets games. I know I'm in Boston now and yelling and shouting, and I think that's a lot of what's going on in the audience. I think that the show addresses concerns that people have, and I think that they get a chance to let out some energy about it.
Is there any stacking of your audience?
No, I invite 2 to 3 people into the audience that are seated in the audience who are expert one way or the other on the issue that we're discussing, so that when the loudmouths are opened up for people to come down to, they're usually the first ones down, and it encourages the rest of the audience not to have any fears about coming down.
Profile a viewer, profile an audience member.
A profile an audience member, he or she is between the ages of 18 and 34 years of age. Now, of course, it's expanding into the older audience. They earn $31,800 a year. They hold jobs, sometimes so the family holds 2 jobs. They have 2.1 children, and they're frustrated.
Do you agree with what you hear in terms of the profile of the audience? How about you, Bill? What do you see?
Well, I mean, I think that in a way, it's not, the issue isn't so much what the audience is like, but what the show is like. I believe him when he talks about his demographics. I think you've said that more women than men watch the show. Have you seen?
Now, yeah, originally it was 80-20 men. Now it's grown so that it's more women. And 68% of the audience is between the ages of 18 and 34. The remainder skews. Now it's starting to build. The older group is starting to watch it, 45 plus.
So it just seems, although I think the demographics are expanding, it just, I think you have to talk about the quality of the show. And the quality of the show is basically, he's trading on rudeness, trading on sensationalism rather than trading on ideas or issues or discussion. I mean, people, whatever the demographics are, people aren't turning into that show to become informed, to learn something about the issues of the day.
Why do you think
they're tuning in because in the same way that it's sort of like ideological mud wrestling, with the emphasis on mud wrestling. It's like professional wrestling. They're there to see. They're there for this. They're there to hear people yell,
they're there to hurt
scream,
people's
hoot,
feelings.
and explode emotionally over certain issues. That's it. There's any information that's gotten out of it is absolutely, it's a byproduct of waiting for Mort or waiting for one of the guests to explode. I mean, we just, in that last clip, they loved it. They probably weren't even listening to the fact of what that Russian professor was saying. They loved the fact that he threw that sheet of paper and was getting angry. So that's all it's about.
Why do you think then people tune in? I mean, and let me just play devil's advocate. Enough people have a lot of turmoil in their lives. Why would people tune in to what you call mud wrestling when they can have it in their own homes in many cases if they don't like what they're hearing?
No, I think for two reasons. I think, one, they tune in because it is venting their anger, and people are angry and frustrated, especially that working class segment that I think you described statistically with your demographics. I mean, 31,000 isn't that much anymore. And I think the other reason is they do like what they hear. And that's the part of the audience, I mean, I think that's what critics and liberal writers and whatever object to the most about your show, is the people who confuse its entertainment concept with like what they really should believe.
But you don't see it as just entertainment.
It is an unenlightened attitude that you put
see,
across
I think
on
that
your
is
show.
the elitist intellectual attitude that has been pervasive according to my type of audience,
I
all right?
understand, but
because gentlemen like this, all right, want to say nothing is heard. Consequently, it's gentlemen like this who would form committees to study the issue, then go to the politicians.
I want enlightened discussion of the issue.
What is enlightening to you, pal, what is enlightening to you might not be enlightening to someone else. You may be very enlightened by Bill Buckley, all right, giving you all this esoteric bullcrap, and 5% of the people understand how he's communicating, because only 5% of the people... Communications, baby, is saying exactly what's on your mind and letting you say it too.
Yeah, but I think that too often what happens is that conclusions are stated, and the audience doesn't really get exposed to what is the reasoning that leads up to these conclusions, what are the facts leading up to the conclusion. And I think that you can have the same thing going on the left as the right. I mean, we can get...
You're right, because there are certain shows where the final conclusion is never aired, because, frankly, I don't know what the final conclusion is. But they'll think of it, instead of some elitist down in Washington or over at the State House coming up with the answer. Let them
You mean
come
what
up
you're
with
saying
it.
is that by airing the issues, you're giving people a sense to think about them and form their own opinion. You don't have to come to a conclusion.
Well, yes and no,
but setting up an us versus them attitude. Which
Yeah, it
is
is an us versus them attitude.
Us versus them.
It is an us
Whatever
versus
liberal
them.
scapegoat you happen to
It
have on
is
the
an
show,
us, and it's not always liberals, pal, all right? It's not always liberals. It is us versus them. It's me versus you right now, right?
Right.
All right.
But that
It's me
changes.
versus you. They can define in their own mind whether they like you or me philosophically. That's up to them. Not up to me to tell them who to like or you.
I'm not identifying myself with
You
the
are.
people.
You're a critic. You're telling everyone what to like.
But you're not.
Like,
I'm giving my
like all
opinion the
these
same way you do,
intelligent,
that's all.
like you talk about tabloid TV, all right? You've dubbed me tabloid TV. What the hell do you think 2020 is, or 60 Minutes? It's the lowest form of tabloid TV, where they edit everything out and only get their point of view out.
Then you change the subject. As usual, you change the subject.
What about the criticism that...
And as usual, you're incapable of picking it up.
No, I
Why don't you pick it up,
Cliff? I mean, you trade in the idea that you don't like liberal equivocating, mealy-mouthed, yada yada, you know, getting a committee together to study the issue. You would be surprised how much I, for example, agree with you. I mean, I said in the piece I wrote, a fairly negative piece I wrote about your show, that cut the crap is a really underrated retort. I mean, it truly is. On the other hand, I think your show stops way short of actually getting responsible spokespeople on for the issues. You very often have people on both sides who really are falling over that edge into the crackpot. You know?
In some areas, I do have politicians on.
That's
You're
entertaining. Some of them are, but I was thinking more of the academics and the people you say, he is an expert, he is a professor of this, this, and this. Well, he's a professor at this, this, and this at some junior college in Kansas.
See, there's the elitist attitude again.
No.
Putting down the
That's
junior college in Kansas.
That's too easy to say.
It's too easy for you to admit.
It's too easy to say.
Take a look at a clip from last night. In fact, a local man, a minister from here in Boston, who called himself mainstream, and boy, he and Mort really got into it. Watch this.
In our great city of Boston, where I come from, in Boston there is a statue to Mary Dyer, and the Calvinists of Massachusetts thought her a cult person and hanged her on Boston Common. Today we have a statue to her in front of the State House in Massachusetts.
The freedom of the members?
This is the land. Wait a minute. This is the land of the free.
Reverend, Reverend, you hold it. Zip it up, baby.
Okay.
What about if indeed what we...
if you, at the end of the show, you kept at him, and you know the man kept smiling every time you insulted him. And that kind of blows me away. Sometimes you actually see a guest take the insult and smile. Does that mean you've connected before the show?
No, I never see a guest before the show. I think what it means is you can do two things. You can cry or you can smile if you're trying to hold any anger. The beautiful part about it is we hugged each other after the show and he asked if he could have a picture taken with me. That then makes me think, was he trying to be a showman by taking a devil's advocacy position and supporting something he didn't really believe in?
Sure acted like he believed in it.
I don't know.
Well, why did you jump down his throat? I mean, I don't know the gentleman. Apparently he's local. He seemed to have something to say. He seemed to believe in what he had to say.
He did.
His delivery was horrible. He wasn't credible because he seemed a little bit loony, a little bit over the edge. Did you come down on him because of his delivery or because of his point?
No, I came down on him because after having it explained to him by people whose children had been taken into cults, whose children had been deprogrammed, who had seen all of these horror stories in cults, still believe that cults should have the right to exist and we should not infringe on their
Sure, but you
freedoms
were
in any
arguing
way.
at cross purposes. He was talking about protecting freedom of religion. You were talking about mind control cults that aren't really religious. That distinction was in fact made in the show. Still, this man persisted, arguing, you know, whatever he wanted, and you made him part of the show. I found that show terribly confusing. The cult leader you had on there was some small-time wimp who only had 5 people in his church. He was uninteresting to me.
Gave an
That's
interview
an
to get
example
on
of what I
the
mean.
show
That's not
saying he had
elitist,
20.
right? I mean, that's not elitist to say you didn't have a big enough...
I'd like to say something about the appeal of the show, at least what attracted my attention to it. I watched wrestling for a while, and I think, you know, today with people having 50 channels and the way they watch television is they don't sit down and watch one show at a time. And when you flip through the dial and you see Mort going down someone's throat, that's going to grab your attention just like a 30-second raisin commercial. And I think that it works for today's kind of television.
Well, you see, I don't know what works for today's kind of television because I didn't sit back and plan to do this show. I've never been on television before. When I came in and the set was built for me, they had a chair for me to sit down, I said, that's not the way I...
How long have you been doing this? 10 months?
10 months.
You're finding yourself as you go.
No, what I'm finding is that there are certain things I did in the early shows that got a response. I had no reference points to be theatrical. Now I have reference points after 10 months. I know that if I go up and rip your lungs out, that's going to get a certain reaction. So I'll do it.
And that's an issue. We have a clip. We have a clip. I want to ask you whether you mediate or you incite. When you watch this clip and see what you think. Look.
I'm a PhD
You're
in
a
biology,
PhD, right?
experimental
I've taken a
embryology.
few biology courses. I may not be an MD, but I know that a female is an XX and a male is an XY. And you ain't nothing, buddy.
It isn't black and white.
It's got to be cut and dry.
It is not.
No,
cut
it
and
has.
dry.
Yes, it does. You come out XX
It is
or
not
XY.
cut and dry.
You
Why are
tell
you so
me where it
upset?
doesn't come out XX
Why
and
are
XY,
you so upset
and then
about
I'll believe you.
It's not cut and dried, and I want to know why you're so upset about it.
Listen, lady, don't point at me or whatever.
You weren't even involved there in that clip, and I thought you were. But in that case, why didn't you jump in?
Because I thought they were handling it a good debate between themselves. Let them argue it out. I thought they were getting.
You agree in
this gentleman made a good observation. He says there's real hate there.
Yes.
Hey pal, that's life. There is hate in life. There is hate. So why not let that hate come out? There are safety valves, pressure valves on every steam pipe in your home so it doesn't blow up. That's a safety valve. Release it. Let it go.
You say that there's hate. On the other hand, though, will you wear well only showing anger? Do you show enough love on your show, the other side of you? No, it's a question.
I think I do. If you bring out an abused child, if you have an older person who's been abused their whole life simply because the only thing they did wrong was grow old, you're damn right I love them. I'll die for them.
We'll continue this conversation.
I think he's absolutely the greatest thing that's ever happened to this country.
You know what? You pulled up this morning in a white limo. Someone told me that.
Yep.
And does he know you follow him everywhere that he goes?
Well, I don't know, but I think he's great. I think his show is great. I think he addresses some wonderful issues. things I was never aware of. I don't know what makes a critic, but I know that his show allows people who don't have a college degree to get involved and to give an opinion, and I think that's important. Also, I want to ask Mort something.
Let me ask you something first.
Please.
I don't mean this. I don't mean to be rude. Are you a groupie?
No, I'm not a groupie.
Well, do
When
you have
you say, do I follow him? I don't follow him around the country. I was here last week. I
Oh.
do watch his shows all of the time.
Have you seen him in New York? Have you been to New York?
I have an office in New York. I'm in the publishing business.
Have you been in the audience?
Yes, a few times.
Yeah. What's it like?
I think it's great. I think people get an opportunity to express their views. I think Mort allows them to. I think he's sweet and sensitive when people deserve it, and I think he's rude when they deserve it.
How about the way he treats women? How about his perception of women?
I have never felt that he treated women badly at all. As a matter of fact, I think he goes the other way to treat them very nicely.
Okay, your question.
My question is, what does Mort think of the dupe?
Well, you know, it's a tough year when you got Tweedledee and Tweedledummer. And I guess he's done a good job in some respects for Massachusetts. I don't really know.
Man's not here to
I'm sorry
defend
for the
himself.
quality of both of our candidates this year.
You, Stuart Tauber, I want you to meet this man who is, what's your title, Stu? Stand up, could you, for me? I know, you're behind the scenes at Channel 38, right?
I'm the assistant general manager, yeah.
You air Morton's show.
Yeah, we carry a show.
Interesting that the 3 network affiliates here decided not to, and you decided to take it.
Well, I'm not sure if that's a question. It's a statement.
Okay, why?
I don't know that they did decide whether not to take it or not. We actually saw the show in New York on WWOR and decided that we thought that it might be the vehicle that we could use to establish some ratings and audience in the late night area.
And
That's why we went after it. I didn't know that the network affiliates decided not to take it. I don't even know if they had an opportunity to take it, quite frankly.
Ratings are up?
Tremendously.
Advertisers, any of them refuse to buy?
Yes. Right now, there's what is referred to in the vernacular horse trade, the hit list, that there are certain advertisers that don't want to advertise in the Morton Downey show. But quite frankly, a couple of them have already come over the line when they see the ratings. And from a historical standpoint, I've noticed that there are other shows in the past that had been on this so-called hit list, that when ratings started to establish themselves, an audience appeared in those shows.
Like who show?
Like Divorce Court, for example.
Oh,
It was on a hit list at one time. A couple others of that.
Do
of that
kids
genre.
watch Morton Downey?
I doubt it. It's on our station. It's on. I mean, they very well might if they're up at 11:30
Well,
at
it's
night.
summertime, and I would think, you know, a lot of kids are up late at night.
I don't think it's the chosen fare for children, if that's what your question is. I'm not sure. They may be there when their parents are there, some children. I mean, I don't even think they would understand what was going on, depending upon their ages.
Oh, I think from 10 on, they'd very well understand what's going on.
Interestingly enough, the comment that the networks wouldn't take it, on the West Coast, ABC has bought it up and down the coast.
But you got a problem in San Francisco, is it? Is it
Uh,
KRON?
That's because San Francisco, the NBC station, is owned by a newspaper, all right? And so they're not interested in the show, although it's the #1 show in San Francisco, and they still don't like it.
We have a phone call, Mort. Good morning, you're on Good Day. Hello?
Hello?
Yes, go right ahead.
Yeah, I'm Peggy from Cambridge, and I think that Mort is God's gift to television.
Why?
Why? Because he explains and, you know, and gives it to everybody. It's like we try and hold it inside. And what we try and hold inside, Mort lets us get it out and go for it.
Well, Mort says it's not so much that you try to hold it inside, you haven't got any place to put it.
Could I ask that one
That's
more
what you
question?
say, right?
Well, I say
Can
no,
I
there's
ask
no
one-
platforms for them. There's no platforms for us where we can speak our piece.
Go ahead, Ira.
I'd like to ask you, ma'am, 1 or 2 things that you remember or that you've learned from watching the Morton Downey show.
You talking to the lady on the phone?
Yeah, Peggy, are you there?
Yes, I
Go
am.
ahead. What are one or two things you remember from Morton Downey? Then we have to take a break.
All right, what I've learned is that, you know, you can actually speak up. And just because you're a woman, that you just don't have to sit back and take everybody's crap. That as a woman, you can speak up and speak your piece and let it be heard. You don't have to sit back and let a man or anybody take advantage of you, you know, psychologically or anything else. You can just stand up and speak your piece and let them know that just because you're a female, you don't have to sit back and take what they have to give you. He's given me a lot of strength over the past year. I've never had the strength that I've had in all my life, my 54 years of life that I have had since I've been watching the Morton Downey show.
It must make you feel pretty good, Morton. This. You know, most of us in New England had never seen your show before it aired on the Superstation and then on 38. But there is a California-based show that says it has a similar format and with a host who says that you have ripped him off.
What he said was, I stole his act.
Okay.
And my answer is, he's right. His was an act. Mine's real.
All right, let's take a look. This is Wally George, and this is what he has to say about Morton Downey.
Wally George back here with Hot Seat, the original Hot Seat, may I say. 6 years, our big anniversary coming up next week. And you all know there's this big controversy now going on in all the papers. I understand the New York Daily News had a big story last week about Downey and yours truly. And I can tell you absolutely, this man has stolen my format, lock, stock, and barrel.
You're coming up with the usual simplistic answers, Wally, that conservatives who don't know what the hell they're talking about spout. And you've got an audience out here.
Wait, hold on.
You've got an audience of monkeys out here
Wait a minute.
who do everything that you tell them to do.
Just hold on a minute. I'm warning you. The next time you...
Don't warn me, punk. Stay in your seat. Stay in your seat. Stay in your seat, Wally. Stay in your seat.
Mort, it's going to thrill Mort to know that Wally George is on the telephone. Good morning, Wally.
Morton?
Good morning, Wally.
I finally cornered you, you little rodent. I finally got you cornered.
Wally, at least I don't have to dye my hair blonde to show I'm still weird.
Hold on, Big Mouth. Why don't you admit
Wally,
to the people...
it's great how you are when you're 3,000 miles away. You wouldn't face me, you scum-breathed rat, in a million years.
One at a time. Wally.
Why don't you admit to the people that you ripped me off? I've been doing this program for 6 years in Los Angeles.
Wally, wait a minute.
With a .6 rating, Wally. Why don't you tell
Wally,
him
I
that?
have a question for you. Are you, a lot of people have used some of these techniques. You say it's a ripoff. Raleigh, you're there?
What I'm saying is, Morton Downey Jr. for 55 years has tried to make it as himself, and he couldn't do it, so he had to be Wally George II.
Wally,
that's how Morton Downey made a name for
Wally,
himself.
quickly remember this. Remember this in your... Wally, if you can remember this for just 1 second in your decrepit brain. Henry Ford maybe didn't invent the car, but he sure as hell built a better one than the guy before.